Difference about assurance and insurance. Generally, insurance and assurance are considered to be the same thing, but these two have a different meaning. What are those? To understand that, you can see a difference chart is presented in front of you, where 3 points are stated which will explain us the proper differences between assurance and insurance. The first column states the points related to insurance, and the second part is related to the points of assurance. So let us read and understand. Point number 1 says, the contract of insurance, the insured must suffer a loss or damage to claim the compensation. But in case of assurance, what happens? The sum assured is bound to be paid whether the insured suffers a loss or not. Now, what does that mean? It means that in case of insurance, there has to be a damage or there has to be a loss. Then only we can claim the compensation. But in case of assurance, whether there is a loss or whether there is not a loss, that's not a part of our concern. The sum or the compensation will be received even if there is a loss or even if there is no loss. Understood? Insurance and assurance, first point of difference is the happening of the event. If the event happens, then we get a compensation in case of insurance. But in case of assurance, whether the event happens or the event does not happen, does not matter. We will get our compensation or we will get the sum that was assured to us. Understood? Second point. Second point says the term insurance is used when the risk is uncertain. That means it can happen also, it cannot happen also. For such type of events which can happen, which cannot happen, that time we use the term insurance. But when is the term assurance used? The term assurance is used when the risk is certain and it is bound to happen, means such kind of event will happen. Now let us understand this with the help of an example. Suppose in case of a fire insurance, when will the compensation be paid? The compensation will be paid only when then occurs a fire. Correct? But do you think that happening of the fire or occurrence of the fire will positively happen? It can happen that a person has taken a fire insurance for his shop and there was never a fire. That means that happening of the fire is a probable decision. It can happen also, it cannot happen also. So for such type of events, we use the term insurance. Right? But what about the term assurance? Assurance is used for those events which will happen. Now for that, let's take the example of life insurance. So life insurance is generally done because in this contract, the compensation will be paid at the death of the insured. So death of the person will happen. It is not that the person is immortal, he will never die. He will die. Whether, now that can be a thing that he can die within the maturity period or after the maturity period. But he will die. So for such an event where the risk is certain and it is bound to happen, we use the term assurance. But for such events where the risk is uncertain and we do not know whether it will happen or whether it will not happen, that time we use the term insurance. Understood point number 2? Now point number 3 says, in insurance, the compensation is only paid on the happening of an event. Just now I said when the fire will take place, then only the insured will get the compensation. Right? But in case of assurance, what happens? The compensation is paid whether the event happens or not. Means if the person dies within the maturity period, then he will get the compensation. And if the insured does not die within the maturity period, then at the expiry of the maturity period, the amount will be given to the insured. Now, what is maturity period? It is a term for which the insurance was taken. For example, 10 years or 20 years. So, if in the next 20 years the insured dies, then on the death he gets the compensation. But in case 20 years have passed of taking the insurance policy and the insured is well alive, then just at the end of the 20th year he will get his sum assured. So whether the event is happening or not, means whether the death of the insured is happening or not, in case of assurance, the insured is getting his return, getting his compensation. But in case of insurance, what happens? In insurance, the compensation will only be received only if the event happens. Okay, what examples are given? Fire insurance and marine insurance for insurances, and for assurance it is the life insurance. Now in general term we use life insurance taking the word insurance, but life insurance is actually an assurance where we understand that whether the incident, whether the event happens or not, the compensation will be received. And it is for such types of risk which will happen. That risk will happen. I hope this difference between assurance and insurance would be very clear to you. In general terms, we use this as the same term in the same meaning, but now I hope the proper difference between these two terms would be very clear to you. So that is all for today. We'll meet you in the next video. Thank you.